Welcome to the Relentless Podcast with Kyle Becker. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to stay informed about the state of America. Together, we can stay engaged and keep in the fight to make a better nation for ourselves and future generations. As your host, I'll be guiding you through this hectic news week, arming you with the most important facts about the most important stories. I'll be giving you my insights from my time as a writer and cable news producer for the top primetime TV show, who helped the #1 cable news network identify the best stories to cover. And I'll be giving you my expertise as a viral media expert for the most engaged news source on social media before the Trump election, as well as my insights from working as a foreign journalist and my perspective as a highly trained political analyst. That being said, let's dive right in with the biggest story in America, the criminal conspiracy to elect Donald Trump. This week, we saw the start of testimony for Trump defendants in Fulton County's RICO case, who stand accused of the criminal offense of trying to re-elect President Donald Trump. The attorney in the case, Scott Grubman, representing one of the 19 accused, brilliantly argued, if the court can try these defendants together and find them guilty only because they shared the cause of trying to re-elect Trump, then Fani Willis may as well charge all 72 million Trump voters as part of this alleged criminal conspiracy.
Discussing the logistics of how to go through the electoral contact. So that's what I'll call the alternate elector alleged conspiracy. Mr. Chesborough has been indicted as part of that conspiracy. He's alleged to be part of that conspiracy. Obviously, we will defend those charges, but that's conspiracy A, if you will. Then there are 2 or 3 other conspiracies. With all due respect to Ms. Powell, and nothing I say, of course, in this should indicate whatsoever that I'm commenting on the evidence against Ms. Powell. And I apologize. I know that's not Ms. Powell, but her representative, Mr. Rafferty. Ms. Powell is alleged to have engaged in a conspiracy, again, just accepting the allegations and the indictment is true, dealing with the computer systems down in Coffee County, Georgia. And those computer systems, as we allege in our indictment, Mr. Chesborough, in our motions, Mr. Chesborough is not even alleged to have undertaken anything, even remotely related to the Coffee County conspiracy, which I'll call it. Then there's a third alleged conspiracy. And that third alleged conspiracy, I'll call, I don't necessarily want to use her name because of the circumstances, but the poll worker conspiracy, where there are allegations that certain individuals named in the indictment went and tried to apply some pressure tactics to a certain poll worker that I believe works here, lives here in Fulton County. That is also a conspiracy that in no way, shape, or form involves Mr. Chesborough. And again, that's not my defense take on it. That's according to the allegations in the indictment. Now, again, as I started off, Your Honor, I understand that RICO does provide flexibility. What I would argue to the court, however, is that, of course, RICO does not overrule all of the rules and statutes and constitutional provisions that ensure that Mr. Chesborough not only has a speedy trial, which of course he's already demanded, but a fair trial. And Mr. Aurora will talk more about the detailed case law, but it's pretty clear here, Your Honor, that if this case were allowed to go to trial with either all 19 defendants, which obviously it seems like that's probably not going to happen, but even with just Mr. Chesborough and Ms. Powell, you're going to have 2 cases in one. You're going to have, and I'll be very interested to hear the government's good faith estimate of evidence and witnesses, but you are going to have days, if not weeks, God forbid, maybe even say months, given some experience in some other high profile cases that are happening in this building under the RICO statute. You're going to have weeks, if not months, of testimony just related to the Coffee County allegations. And because, if you've just reviewing the publicly available information related to the Coffee County allegation shows that at least how the state indicted it, it's a alleged wide-ranging conspiracy involving various people, involving very specific allegations about computer trespass and the like. And then you're going to have a full trial, same trial, but somehow you're going to have another full trial within that same trial about the alternate electors. Now, I suspect that the government is going to, or the state, I'm sorry, is going to say, well, it's all connected with the same purpose. And therefore, it makes sense to keep all these charges together and keep all these defendants together. But, Your Honor, I would ask you to please keep in mind that the purpose that we're talking about here, I mean, I guess you can say the purpose is to elect Donald Trump president. But if that were the purpose, and a prosecutor could use a purpose of that magnitude to try to tie together charges and defendants that otherwise have nothing to do with each other, then, you know, before we know it, millions of people, literally millions of people could have been charged in this conspiracy. These are totally separate cases, Your Honor. And I believe, as you'll see from my colleague, Mr. Aurora, who will get up and talk about the case law. Thank you for allowing us to do that, because he's a lot more on top of that than me. And as you'll hear from Mr. Rafferty, I suspect on behalf of Ms. Powell, it is going to significantly affect these defendants' rights to a fair and impartial trial.
But perhaps we shouldn't give the hard left any ideas. The absurdity of Fulton County DA's case is really the way that it takes a laundry list of innocuous actions which are performed by any presidential campaign, texting associates, sending emails, giving speeches, filing lawsuits, and twisted it all into some kind of criminal conspiracy, some kind of nefarious scheme, all because of the radical left disagreeing with the political objective, re-electing the hated candidate, Donald Trump. The left concocts an unfounded assumption of criminal intent, all framed within the intellectually dishonest narrative that challenging elections and seeking legal remedy in the courts, asking election officials to do their jobs, asking the President of the Senate to send back slates of electors to the states, is tantamount to a political coup. It is seeking to overturn the election. It is attempting to stay in power. It is fomenting a supposed insurrection. However, the corrupt media tries to frame it. Everything the Trump campaign was trying to do was legal and has precedent in American history. The Trump campaign's actions in response to the 2020 election, filing court cases, asking for recounts, telling officials to do their jobs, seeking to throw out illegal ballots, giving a commonplace political speech, preparing alternate slates of electors, telling congressmen to reject electors, requesting President of the Senate Pence to return slates of electors to the states, all legal. Let's start with Pence, who lies about what he was asked to do in the 2020 election. In his letter of the morning of January 6, Vice President Mike Pence asserted that, quote, some believe that as vice president, he should be able to accept or reject votes unilaterally, unquote. He repeated the claim later in the letter, quote, I do not believe that the founders of our country intended to invest the vice president with unilateral authority to decide which electoral votes should be counted during the joint session of Congress, unquote. He made such a claim 4 separate times in the letter. But that is not what the president asked him to do, and he knows it. He was not being asked to have unilateral authority to do anything. He was vesting the power in the states to decide the slates of electors. Here is Pence talking about what would have happened if he had returned slates of electors to the states, saying sending it back to the House will cause chaos.
They're saying all you needed to do was just take a pause. What do you say to that?
I say that's completely false, and it's contrary to American history, to our Constitution, and to the laws of this country. And I never considered it, Martha. Look, when the first time I heard speculation that as vice president I'd have the authority to overturn the election by returning or rejecting votes, I frankly dismissed it out of hand. Look, the founders of this country had just won a war of independence against a king. And I was confident as a student of American history that those founders would have never vested the vice president or anyone else with unilateral authority to decide what electoral college votes to count and which not to count. I was clear on that throughout. I was clear with President Trump throughout, all the way up to the morning of January 6th. But let's be clear on this point. It wasn't just that they asked for a pause. The president specifically asked me, and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes, which would have resulted in the issue being turned over to the House of Representatives, and literally chaos would have ensued. So Well, Martha, I just people can read the indictment, and frankly, I've said before, I had hoped it had not come to this point. You know, I don't know if the government can meet the standard, the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt for criminal charges. But the American people deserve to know that President Trump and his advisors didn't just ask me to pause. They asked me to reject votes, return votes, essentially to overturn the election and to keep faith with the oath that I made to the American people and to Almighty God. I rejected that out of hand, and I did my duty then.
Quote of senior editor Jack Posobiec, and this proves that efforts to prepare for Pence turning over the election could not have been an illegal conspiracy. Dismiss the case, he added. A reporter for the Arizona Sun-Times, Rachel Alexander, reporting on the disbarment trial for Trump-affiliated attorney John Eastman, gives us further context. Quote, in his disbarment hearing, Trump's attorney John Eastman just revealed that at a key meeting on January 4th, 2021, with Trump and Pence never objected to it being suggested by someone at the meeting that he reject some electoral slates, nor did he object to Eastman's suggestion as one possibility that he could delay certification. Instead, Pence told Trump he would take the options into consideration. Pence is such a hypocrite, now acting like he was against it all along, unquote, she said. Another noted on X in March that this is exactly what Pence did. A Simple Patriot said, quote, on top of all this coward, Mike Pence wanted to issue his statement on how he would handle elections and told Trump was at the ellipse for the speech. He didn't even have the courage and respect to sit down and discuss face-to-face with Trump beforehand. Gutless coward, unquote. And to top it all off, the U.S. Congress proved his point by passing a law ensuring a vice president acting as a president of the Senate at an electoral college wouldn't be authorized to do this again. A blatantly unconstitutional piece of legislation because it overrides the Constitution. Quote, Trump wanted Pence to reject votes for Biden. A new bill would prevent that. The proposed legislation, titled the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Act, states that the role of the vice president in counting electoral votes is purely ceremonial, unquote. Oh, so it wasn't purely ceremonial before? This brings us to the point that Fulton County DA Fani Willis appears to have falsified claims to the court for asserting that a legally convened alternate slate of electors in Georgia was an illegal conspiracy to defraud voters. In her indictment issued on August 14, Willis claimed that the presence of Republican electors for Trump constituted an illicit conspiracy aimed at overturning Georgia's 2020 election results. Those charged in the alleged conspiracy included David Schaefer, one of Georgia's 2020 Republican electors, and Ray Smith, who served as one of Trump's attorneys during the contest. However, among the documents gathered during Willis's lengthy investigation of Republicans was a transcript of meeting that contradicted her allegations. A transcript of the December 14, 2020 meeting of Georgia Republican electors obtained by the Federalist clearly reveals that the intent behind appointing alternate electors was not to impersonate public officials, as Willis claimed, but rather to legally preserve Trump's challenge to the state's election results. At the outset of the meeting, Schaefer explicitly stated that he and his fellow Republicans were acting as Republican nominees per presidential elector, not as duly elected and qualified presidential electors. Thus, Willis appears to be guilty of one of the offenses that she is falsely charging Donald Trump and his associates with, making, quote, false declarations before a grand jury or court, unquote. That brings us to the Coffee County election data aspect of the case. Again, Fani doesn't appear to have the goods. Critically, she does not have receipts tying the Trump campaign to an allegedly illegal Coffee County voting machine data search, according to the great legal analyst Technofog. Quote, serious issues emerging with the charges brought by Fulton County DA Fani Willis. The indictment's RICO allegations are insufficient to provide notice to the defendants per Georgia law. The alleged contracts to conduct illegal activity between Powell et al. Are non-existent. Computer trespass, count 35, requires the knowing use of the computer without authority. Big problem for prosecutors. The local election board granted access and supervised or directed the technical activities, unquote. And to top this off, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger's testimony undercuts the assertion that Donald Trump in any way asked for illegal activity to find votes. According to George Washington University Law School professor Jonathan Turley, Raffensperger testified that the call, while extraordinary, was a settlement negotiation that took place during a debate over whether to pursue another recount of votes and not a demand to make up new votes. Quote, "The call was misrepresented by the Washington Post, and the transcript later showed that Trump was not simply demanding that votes be added to the count, but rather asking for another recount or continued investigation," unquote. The legal analyst also wraps up his take on Fani Willis's fraudulent racketeering case. Quote, "What is clear is that this is a dangerous path for the country to take in criminalizing election challenges. For many, this looks like a Democratic prosecutor seeking prison sentences for those who challenged a Democratic victory. It could just as easily be replicated by Republican prosecutors," unquote. So this is all a legal Hail Mary filed for the purposes of stopping Trump from running in 2024, while sending a warning to all of Trump's supporters that they could be dragged into court for the alleged crime of helping him win an election, and challenging the election results, like Democrats have done in every lost election. But Fani Willis's Rico Hail Mary is about as persuasive as Uncle Rico bragging about throwing a bomb in Napoleon Dynamite.
How much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over the mountains?
But as ridiculous as Fani Willis's case is on the merits, there is a dead serious effort behind it to stop Americans from protesting about elections or challenging elections.